everybody. Great to have you with me. I'm so happy that you're here. It's the Elysabeth Alfano Show on WCGO. Oh, you know, if you listen to me every week, that you don't have to sign up for 1590 AM and 95.9 FM on your dial. You can always just go to Alexa, say, hey, Alexa, play me WCGO. And you can also go to WCGOradio.com. All right. Now, those of you who are with me every week, you also know that I like to kick off the show with some breaking news. So let's get into it because we've got a lot of it. It's always fun to start the show with plant-based burgers. Hey, why the heck not? Light Life, which is headquartered in Chicago under Greenleaf Foods. Light Life has just launched the next generation burger in all of Harvey's, which is a Canadian quick serve restaurant chain, in all of Harvey's across Canada. So very cool. We love Light Life, not just because it's 40 years old and they were kind of the original Tempe, which I still use, but also because they are opening North America's largest plant-based only factory right in the heart of factory farming in Indiana. And they're going to be supplying 460 jobs. So we love you, Light Life, which is indeed owned by Maple Leaf, which is a meat company. But we're going to forgive them that because they're making so much progress on plant-based foods. Impossible Foods, we love them. Impossible Burger, what's not to love? They are now at Trader Joe's. So very exciting. Go to your Trader Joe's, get yourself an Impossible Foods burger. I do love them. Okay, now here's the real news that I want to get to. Vegconomist magazine reports, hold on, I think I have to put on my sexy librarian glasses for this one. Are you ready? Vegconomist magazine reports that 1.1 billion has been spent on plant-based investments in 2020 alone. This is 2.5 times more than all that happened in 2019. The report is calling plant-based protein, quote unquote, mainstream. Oh, I feel ya, Vegconomist. I couldn't agree more. I also had some breaking news on my website, ElysabethAlfano.com. One of the principals of the iconic website, happycow.net. We love them. They've saved our lives a gazillion times as we used to travel around the world and needed to find vegan restaurants. Love them. Ken Spector was on my show last week and he announced, first time ever, breaking news on my website, ElysabethAlfano.com, that there are more vegan restaurants opening during COVID than closing. In fact, to the tune of 25% more vegan restaurants have opened than closed, for a net positive more vegan restaurants during COVID. It's just kind of amazing information. Okay, one more bit that I want to share with you before I bring on today's guest who is going to help you. Oh my gosh, do you need his help? Or I do. Let's start there. I need his help and advice. But before I want to do that, I want to share with you, you guys know, August 8th, I'm having my Jumpstart Your Plant-Based Life class. Go and register at ElysabethAlfano.com/recipes. I'm going to give you all that you need to create your own menu plans, to clean up your kitchen, get out the bad stuff, put in the good stuff, hone in on that shopping list, and give you lots of life tips and hacks so that you can be vegan even when you're eating out at parties and restaurants and all that kind of good stuff. So you really want to get my tips and all these menu plan ideas. It's a 3-hour class, August 8th. Just go to ElysabethAlfano.com/recipes, and it's my Jumpstart Your Plant-Based Life class. Now, I will say that every once in a while, somebody says like, Elysabeth, I can't cook. I don't have time. Okay, one more thing for you. Vistro.com is a place that I go to all the time so that they can just deliver meals to me immediately, which is so wonderful. So if you don't have time to cook and you think like, oh, this week is really busy at work and I'm going to need some meal plans, just go to Vistro.com and put in the code Alfano, ALF as in Frank, ANO. That's going to get you 20% off. You see, lots of these life hacks are always in my plant-based class on August 8th, Jumpstart Your Plant-Based Life. And if you don't have time to go to class, you can still get 20% off at Vistro.com. Just go and put in the code Alfano. Okay, let's get down to business, folks, because I have a great guest. I want to bring him in, Dr. Glenn Livingston. He is the author. Did I tell you that we need his help? He is the author of Never Binge Again. Glenn, thanks for being with me.
Thank you so much for having me. It's great to be here.
So you are a psychologist and a former multi-million-dollar consultant to the healthcare industry. But most importantly, you are the author of the book, Never Binge Again. And you're also the creator of that same program. And I just want to hop right in and get into it because I think so many people need to hear what you have to say. So many of us, I guess you'd call it emotional eating, binge overeat. Why the heck is this?
Well, I think there's a perfect storm in today's society. If you look at the big food companies, they're engineering all of these hyper palatable food-like substances, right? They're concentrated sources of starch and sugar and fat and oil and excitotoxins, and they're all designed to hit the bliss point in the reptilian brain without giving us enough nutrition to feel satisfied, right? And so every time you're looking for love at the bottom of a bag or a box or a container, there's some fat cat in a white suit with a mustache that's laughing all the way to the bag. And yeah, I know. And I don't mean to say these are all evil people. They're doing their job, and the consumer in some ways wants to be lied to, but it's bad stuff.
Oh, that's interesting that you say that. The consumer in some ways wants to be lied to. And I think we all do know, because you're kind of saying this by mentioning that comment. We kind of all do know that these are lies. We, new and improved or stay healthy and thin, even though it's, all chemicals, et cetera. So we kind of all know what's healthy and what's not. Veggies are healthy, folks. Processed food isn't. We know it, but we want to hear the lies anyway. Tell me more about that.
Well, people like good news about their bad habits, and these foods are extraordinarily addictive. People like to think that they're totally immune, but we didn't have, bags and boxes and containers on the savannah while we were evolving. Like we didn't have chocolate trees or, pasta, and we didn't have all this stuff in the savannah while we were evolving. We had fruits and vegetables. We can get some nuts and seeds once in a while, and that's really about it. I mean. And I'm a vegan like you are, and so I believe that we weren't really evolved to have animals. Some people believe that we were. So
we were not, folks. We're here to tell you, we were not.
But people want good news about their bad habits. So I was in a store the other day, and I saw there was this set of potato chips now made with avocado oil, but that ignores the fact that the way that the chips are fried produces carcinogenic acrylamides and HCA heterocycloamines and all these other chemicals. Nobody really thinks potato chips are good for you. But now with avocado oil, there's that, it kind of quiets that part of our brain that wants to justify that it's okay and gets us right back down to the lizard brain and say, okay, well, this is healthy. And it's not. It's just good news about our bad habits.
So it's tricky business because marketing is such a beast that it's hard to get off this cycle, not just our own emotional cycle. So we'll talk about emotional overeating, et cetera, but just this barrage of advertising, because even some of the vegan companies, and I, like you, am vegan, and I'm I've got only good things to say about vegan companies. I have to find myself saying like, okay, step back, step away from the bag of potato chips. Now, I'd never heard that potato chips are a carcinogen, and I've never heard that before. Thank you for sharing that with us. But, these little messages like, oh, it's plant-based butter, but it has avocado oil, is as if it were meant to be okay. What do we do about this with so much packaged goods coming our way all the time?
Well, I think that we gravitate towards more whole natural foods to the extent that we can. I'm a big supporter of, Impossible Foods and all of the, I think it's so much better that we have processed vegan foods than processed animal foods, because we're stepping away from animal agriculture and there's less, torture and suffering on the planet. And so I'm a big fan of that. I'm a big fan of, taking baby steps where we can. And I don't think that we live in a world of black and white like that. I think that we want to coax these companies along and vote with their dollars. And but by the same token, I think that we need to distinguish between what's healthy and what's vegan, right? It's really easy to become a junk food vegan these days. And, I think that it's one thing to say, okay, well, I know that I should be having more whole fruits and vegetables, and that's really what we evolved on, and that's how I'm going to optimize my health. But, the second rung around the bullseye for me is these impossible foods, or, once in a while I'll have this or that thing that I used to love that's now vegan and I can have it again. That's one thing. It's another thing to fool yourself and think that potato chips with avocado oil is healthy.
That's right. Right? Yes. Yeah, no, that is not. That's not healthy.
Then you're going down the road where I think Ronald Reagan, I think he classified ketchup as a vegetable back in the 80s for children's
Sounds
diet.
like something he'd say.
Yeah.
Well, okay, so I want to kind of summarize what you're saying for people so that people can get on the right track. Because that's really what we want to do here, folks. So keep it locked because we're going to help you do that today. I think what you're saying is, or at least from the doctors that I've interviewed, so if you are having a vegan burger, we talked about Impossible Foods going to Trader Joe's at the beginning of this show. It is absolutely better than having meat. And here's why. A plant-based burger is going to have no cholesterol. Meat will have cholesterol. A plant-based burger is going to at least have a little bit of fiber, not a whole heck of a lot, but it's going to have a little bit. Meat has nothing. Now you think about our long intestinal system, meat's just going to sit there. It's got no fiber. I didn't know that before I was vegan. Meat is going to have something called trimethylene N oxide, not meant for our bodies. It's going to have animal heme, not meant for our bodies. It's going to have antibiotics, it's going to have hormones. Okay, it is a step in the right direction. But if you look at an Impossible or Beyond, or I don't want to just pick on them, there's lots of others, lots of sausages and stuff. They are processed foods. They're in a box. Nobody thinks they're a carrot. We all know that they're not a head of lettuce. I think we can see this is not a head of lettuce. Okay, but it is a step in the right direction. That said, you talk about something. So we want to keep these foods to a minimum. They're treats. They are treats. And they're not even really meant for vegans. Vegans have already switched over. It's for all the meat eaters that are having trouble giving up meat, its own addictive property. But let's stick with our vegans and how we can help them, and our meat eaters and how we can help them. You talk about how institutionally, there's this concept of, hey, the 80-20 rule or the 90-10 rule of, just be good most of the time and then it's okay. What do you think about that rationale?
I think that it's a reasonable goal in theory. It's like a good North Star to shoot for, but there's a problem with it.
Hold on. Let's talk about the problem right after break. Oh my gosh. And we're back. It's the Elysabeth Alfano Show. We took a little bit of a break there. Dr. Glenn Livingston, thanks for being with me. Right before break, we were talking about the 80-20 rule in dieting. So you hear a lot like, be good 80% of the time, and the rest of the time, the extra 20%, you can kind of go to town. Now, what do you think about that?
I think it might be good in theory, but there is a problem with it having to do with willpower. See, culturally, we're advised to be good 80% of the time and indulge ourselves 20% of the time. But we're not really told what's the 20% and what's the 80%, which leaves us in the position of having to make constant food decisions. Now, willpower, it turns out, is the ability to make good decisions. And it looks like there are only so many good decisions we can make every day. That's why people make better food decisions in the morning than they do in the evening. And it's not just food decisions, by the way. If you give people math problems to do, they have trouble resisting marshmallows afterwards.
Because it's just too much pressure, right? It's like they've worked very hard and then they have to take a break.
So decision making really wears down our willpower. And so it's actually better to decide, let's say you wanted to have chocolate 10% of the time and avoid it 90% of the time. Well, rather than every time you're in front of a chocolate bar at Starbucks, wondering if this chocolate bar has your name on it or not and having to make another decision, you could say, I'll only ever have chocolate the last 3 days of the calendar month. That way your decisions are made 90% of the time. In the last 3 days of the month, you can go to town if you really want to.
Oh my God, this is so helpful. So rather than having to make the decision every day, and is this the right time that I'll cheat? Is now not the right time to cheat? Plan it in advance so that I only cheat on Sundays. Sunday morning or Sunday evening or whatever, or whatever your day is. I only give myself Wednesday to take a break. And then there's no other decisions and you don't have to keep doing this.
Right. And some people like to put a volume limit on that. Some people will say, I never eat flour except for 1 day per calendar week at a restaurant when I can have 2 slices of bread. Right. And a lot of people who felt like they were out of control with bread at restaurants beforehand and out of control with flour in general find that they're okay. So some people need to be abstainers. Some people, for chocolate, for me, I tried 6 ways to Sunday to find a rule that I could have it. And I just can't. I just can't eat chocolate at all. But a lot of people who struggled with certain food substances can actually find that they eat them when they very clearly define the rung of the bullseye and they know where it stops and ends and what they're going to do when they get to the restaurant. So they're not making decisions in the environment of temptation.
Yes. So this requires to know yourself. So you have to know your own weak points and what's going to trip you up and what's not. So for yourself, you've identified chocolate. You're just not going there, can't ever do it. But maybe for you, you could have bread once a week in a very defined situation such that you never really have to think about it again. And once a week, you get to have bread at a restaurant, something like that.
Yeah, my business partner lost 100 pounds saying that he will never have cake again except for Friday mornings with his wife at this one particular restaurant. When he can have one slice. And he lost 100 pounds starting with that rule. So
I love that the rules. I think that really does help us. And it sounds pretty rigid in the beginning, like, oh my gosh, now my life is all going to be rules. I can only have bread on this day at this restaurant. But it is really a start to kind of giving yourself, that sense of control, I think. People often feel that they're just out of control because their lives are out of control, and it can be very defeating. Talk to me about any pep talk that you give people, or how to give people out of a negative mindset.
Well, one of the things to recognize is that the negativity, that voice of self-chastising that you hear after you make a mistake, it's actually binge motivated. I talk about separating your thoughts into constructive versus destructive thoughts by drawing very clear lines. So if I say I will never have chocolate again, then any voice in my head that says, gee, Glenn, you worked out hard enough today, you're not going to get any weight. And besides, chocolate grows on a cocoa plant, and therefore it's a vegetable. I will say, that's my inner food monster. That's not me. That's my inner food monster. And it's squealing for its slop, and I don't listen to monsters tell me what to do. And so when you can draw a really clear line and make that separation, it actually gives you freedom, not restriction. So for example, the fact that we have the discipline to stop at red lights in the city makes it possible for us to drive around in the city to start with. In New York City, you couldn't get anywhere if we didn't have lights.
I see what you're saying. The roadmap is really what allows you to move freely through society. So it's not holding you back. It's actually allowing you to navigate.
Discipline creates freedom. Discipline creates freedom. We're engaged with rules all the time. We just don't know that we've written them. So if you walk into a diner and you sit down at the table and the waitress says, I'll be right back, I just have to get your menu. And there's nobody up front and there's no video camera, nobody would see you take her $10 tip. I would guarantee that you're not going to take that $10 tip, right?
Right.
How come?
Because we've made a rule for ourselves that we don't steal.
Right.
I
never take other people's money, even if I won't get caught.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah. In theory, yes.
It's how we habitually manage our temptations and impulses, which is another word for character. Character is the habitual reactions you have to temptation. And really what you're doing is you're telling yourself, when I say I will never have chocolate on a weekday again, really what I'm saying is not that I want to have a Nazi policeman over me saying, ooh, don't have chocolate on a weekday. What I'm really saying is I've made a decision to become the kind of person who only has chocolate on the weekends. And over time, you don't even really need the rule anymore. Over time, you've just become that kind of person and you don't think about it. Mm-hmm. So it's actually much more freeing than restricting. As long as you make sure that you construct rules that allow you to be thoroughly nourished and you're getting enough calories. Some people use the rules to overly restrict, and that doesn't work.
Yeah, so I love what you're saying. Start with a rule, and then, I know this sounds simple, but then decide to follow it. And I think part of deciding to follow it is the joy and reward you get, not from just feeling better because you're not, ingesting, let's say, all the junk food or all the sugar, all the sweets, but also that reward that you get for, I'm sticking to a plan. This is the sort of person I am. I'm not, running out of control. And that just feeds itself over time. And so it reinforces itself. And this rule-making and decision-making is actually a thing that makes you feel good.
It's the difference between planned eating and emotional impulsive eating. And I tell people you can change your food plan whenever you want to. You can change the rules if you want to. I suggest they don't do it on impulse. I suggest that they sit down and they write down exactly what they want to change and why they want to change it. And then they save a copy of their old rule in case it doesn't work. And they wait 24 hours for it to take effect. That way you can eat whatever you want to tomorrow, but you'll never let your food monster convince you to do something impulsively again. And you wind up being the master of your fate as opposed to a slave to your impulses.
Oh, we're coming back at it right after break. Everybody, thanks for being with me on Jane Unchained and on Facebook. I appreciate it. You know I'm pre-taping my radio show. You know that's how it goes. So we're going to get right back to it here. Dr. Glenn, I'm so thankful for all of your tips. This is helping me personally, so I do appreciate it. It's the Elysabeth Alfano Show. We are back on WCGO. Dr. Glenn Livingston is helping me and hopefully helping you guys too curtail our binge eating. I speak for myself. Maybe this resonates with you. How do we get the inner monster under control so we don't go off the plains with binge eating, which I think we've all been known to do from time to time, which is also known as emotional eating. So right before the break, we were talking about how helpful it is to have a rule for you. First, you have to know yourself. So chocolate for you, Dr. Glenn, is kind of what takes you off the rails. So you know that chocolate's your thing. You make a rule around if you can ever have it again, if so, when, and in particular situations. And then you just decide to follow that rule. I know it sounds simple, but you decide to follow it for all these rewards that it gives you, the person that you want to be, the person who has their life under control, the person who isn't constantly feeling overwhelmed by decision after decision of should I have chocolate? Should I not? Should I have chocolate? You know, it can rule your life. So it's actually getting your whole life under control. But what happens when we do break our own rule? How do we get ourselves back on the wagon?
Okay. First of all, I want to say that your rules don't only have to be restrictive food rules. They could be something that adds something, like I always have 2 pure glasses of spring water when I get up in the morning. They could be something that just supports mindfulness, like I always put my fork down between bites, or I'll never eat in front of a TV again. You can make behavioral rules as well as food rules.
Good.
But okay, so let's say that you break your plan, and there's going to be this voice in your head that says, okay, now you're off to the races. You know, you already blew it, so screw it. Let's just eat whatever we want to the rest of the day.
Oh,
right. And we all know that. And I tell people, well, first of all, if you accidentally chipped a tooth, would you go get a hammer and bang the rest of them out?
No.
You wouldn't do that, right? If you were an archer and you missed the bullseye, would you shoot all the rest of the arrows up into the air and say, screw it, or turn around and shoot them at the audience? You wouldn't do that. If you accidentally touch a hot stove, you didn't say, forget it, I'm a pathetic hot stove toucher. I'm going to just put my whole hand down on it. So to just recognize what's going on, that there's kind of a crazy voice inside and it doesn't make any sense. Just recognize that first and foremost. Then ask yourself, what's the psychology of a winner? And if you look at classic examples of winners in life, like an Olympic archer, the Olympic archer commits with perfection to the bullseye. As she's pulling back the arrow and she's aiming at the bullseye, she's not thinking, maybe I'll make it, maybe I won't. She's visualizing the arrow going into the bullseye before she lets it go. She's almost become one with the bullseye. She commits with perfection. On the other hand, if she misses, she forgives herself with dignity. She analyzes what went wrong. She says, how far did it come from the bullseye? In what direction? In what direction do I need to adjust? Did I have to pull back harder? Do I have to account for the error? She might even say, maybe we have to move the target a little bit. But she commits with perfection once again after she's done the analysis. If you touch a hot stove, you're supposed to feel the pain for the moment. So if you make a mistake with your reading, you feel a little bit of guilt and shame. There are disorders, by the way, where children don't feel pain. And I say children because they don't live past 5 years old.
Right. They hurt themselves so much. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. So there's a psychological function to pain, to a little bit of guilt and shame, but not a lot. The function is to just get your attention like that hot stove. Once you know you know how to avoid the hot stove, then there's no purpose to berating yourself after that. The berating is the inner food monster trying to get you to feel too weak to resist the next binge. So it's binge motivated. It's very hard to stay off track and keep binging if you refuse to yell at yourself. I learned that from Carol Mentor. And if people remember nothing but that, then I'd like them to take that away from this, that if you refuse to yell at yourself after you made a mistake, you'll find yourself getting on track much quicker. What you want to do is collect evidence of success. So every binge is a learning opportunity. Did you have 5 cupcakes instead of 15? Did you stop the binge after a couple hours instead of a couple of days? Did you manage to hold one of your rules? Like maybe you're trying to avoid sugar and flour and you only avoided sugar. Collect evidence of success. Ask yourself how you were able to do that, rather than asking, why can't I stop eating? If you keep saying, why can't I stop eating? You're programming your brain to collect evidence that you can't stop eating. Instead, say, what did I do right? How am I going to do better next time?
I love this. So what you're saying is learn from your mistakes, take away some key learnings that maybe there's some positive way you can phrase this to yourself, and move on. Because if you just stand there and berate yourself, you're just digging your hole. You're just going deeper and deeper and deeper. So there are learnings, just like a sport. I love that analogy to someone who's shooting arrows. That there's, if you miss the bullseye, you'd go right back and do it again, and you'd see how you can do it differently and what did you do wrong that last time, so that you can learn from your mistakes. You get right back on, and you'd almost be emboldened to now hit that bullseye because you'd learn from your mistakes. You feel like you're so much better prepared and you're going at it again.
Well, Elizabeth, if we do that, our brains are learning machines. The reason people don't make progress with their food is that there's all of this negativity obfuscating them actually processing what happened in the mistake. And they think that the target must be wrong, and they jump around from diet to diet, and they beat themselves up so much that then they say, well, I shouldn't aim at anything. I should just aim at a really fuzzy bullseye, or just kind of sort of in the area, and I'll just eat when I'm hungry and stop when I'm full, and that's it. And not recognizing that industry has largely broken our hungry and full meters with all of this processed food.
Yes, I think that's a really important point too. So much salt and sugar and processed foods, processed ingredients are in the processed foods that you almost, you're eating things that have a lot of calories but don't satisfy you, don't fill you up. So your body's just having a hard time regulating. Are you even hungry? And then there's all this emotional sabotage. You just have to clear your brain, like you're saying, make some easy rules that you think you can follow given your personality. Decide to stick to those for all the rewards that you get. And then when you fall off, because you might, it's okay. You hop back on with the learnings of why you fell off and how it's going to be different this time, to start a new pattern for yourself based on success and reward rather than craziness, really.
Yeah. It's also really, I'm sorry, did you want to go on another
No, please go right ahead.
The problem most people have also in getting back on track is they've got themselves caught in a feast and famine loop.
Yeah.
So there's this, most overeaters are very good dieters. And there's this nursery rhyme that goes, when she was good, she was very, very good. But when she was bad, she was hard. And most people are like that. So when they decide they're going to be good, they're eating too little. They're on a fairly serious diet. They're being too restrictive, and they're trying to get the weight off pretty quickly. They want to, quote unquote, make up for what they did with food the last binge or the last couple of binges. And the problem with that is that I think there's an evolutionary mechanism in the brain which says if calories and nutrition are scarce for a period of time or semi-scarce for a period of time, then as soon as they're available, we'd better hoard them. Mm-hmm. And I think that's the root of yo-yo dieting. And what I find for at least 4 to 6 months when I work with people that are really overeating, I find that if they keep a regular, reliable course of nutrition going through their body, and they're not trying to lose more than a pound or so per week, and they make getting things under control, being the master of their own impulses and emotions, more important than the weight loss and their own self-esteem. And, you can love yourself before you've arrived. You don't have to be at your goal weight before you're huggable or lovable or, worthy of being looked at and talked to. By the way, if anybody needs a hug, I'm a hugger.
Me too. No, I love what you're saying, that you don't have to make weight loss the primary goal. Make other things the primary goal, like feeling better or having your life in control, or just the clarity of mind you'll get from not having to make constant food decision every hour. And that feeling of like, I made the wrong decision. Oh my God. Then you're feeling bad, 6 or 7 times a day. So just that clarity of mind is going to free up a lot of excess emotion.
Oh, and if you make specific rules for the key trigger foods that you struggle with, then you won't have any critical food decisions to make. And so the constant obsession with food, it goes away. Because if there are no critical food decisions to make, then there's nothing you have to think about all the time.
I love that. So you're actually taking yourself out of the overthink it equation. You make your decision once, you follow it, and you move on. I love that you're saying that. So you do coach people. Is that right?
Yeah, I have, I've written 8 books now, and we've got we've got a coaching network. We've got a very specific
And you,
process, and we train other practitioners how to do what we do. So yeah.
and you have a free book for us, I think, too. Okay, listeners, listen up.
Well, at neverbingeagain.com, you could get a free copy of the book in Kindle, Nook, or PDF format. Just click on the big red button and sign up for the reader bonuses. A bunch of other stuff you get, like recorded coaching sessions and set of food plan starter templates for any dietary philosophy, most specifically including vegan or whole foods plant-based. But, yeah.
Yes. I love that. Okay, everybody, you can see on the ticker underneath, neverbingeagain.com. You can get your free copy of neverbingeagain.com. I'll also say that on my website, elizabethalfano.com/recipes, I do have a 5-day meal plan. So if you want to get in the practice of organizing a meal plan that's good for you, that already has these rules in place, so they'll be very easy to follow. Sometimes you just need, I tell people, like, take the 5-day plan 2 times in a row. So you got 10 days under your belt of good, healthy eating that works for you, applying Dr. Glenn's rules and decision-making. And that can also be very helpful.
A really good combination. That would be a really good combination.
I love that. I'll also say, if you go to vistro.com, because some of my issues are quantity, it's I can follow the rule, but I can't follow the quantity rule. And so when vistro.com delivers me meals, and then I already have the quantity set out, and I didn't have to cheat or trick myself. So vistro.com, put in the code Alfano if you want a discount. But yeah, so that's been helping me. But I got to keep it under control.
There you go.
There you go. I love that you say that. Okay, now everybody don't go away, because you know that my last segment on radio is always our top 10 tips. So Dr. Glenn and I are going to break it down, and we are going to he's going to give you his top 10 tips for never binging again, which is really how we want to live our lives with that clarity of mind. We'll be right back. Oh, hooray. We have another segment. I'm just learning so much. I just love this. Make a rule, decide to stick to it. Take all the decision-making every day, every meal out of it for yourself. It is wonderful advice. So we'll come back for our top 10 tips. Here we go, everybody. Hey, we're back. It's the Elysabeth Alfano Show on WCGO. Okay, Dr. Glenn Livingston, the author of Never Binge Again. Go to neverbingeagain.com for your free copy. He is going to give us his top tips for, what do you think it is, folks? Never binge again. This is actually life-affirming and life-changing. Hit it, doctor. What's your number one?
My number one tip would be to decide on one simple rule. My grandfather used to say, if you don't know what you're aiming for, you're going to wind up someplace else. And come up with one simple rule. I know a guy who was a trucker. All he ate was fast food on the road all day. And he said, well, I'm not going to stop eating fast food, but I'll never go back for seconds. And he lost 150 pounds starting with that one rule.
I love that. For some people, it's never have soda pop again, and they lose weight just with that one simple rule. I love that. Okay, hit us up with your number two.
The number two rule is that rules work much better than guidelines. Come up with a very clear, bright line that distinguishes healthy from unhealthy eating, so that you can tell the difference between your constructive versus destructive food thoughts.
Yeah, I love that. So make it a real rule. make it a rule that doesn't have all the cheating already beat into it or worked into it. Okay, excellent. Number three.
Number three would be to make a decision to purge your destructive thoughts into a fictitious entity that you can separate yourself from. So that when you are in Starbucks and there's a chocolate bar in front of you on a Wednesday and you hear it saying that it's okay, you can just start tomorrow, you can say, wait a minute, that's not me, that's my inner food monster. And I don't listen to monsters. I'm going to make a decision for myself. You can wake up at the moment of impulse and get those extra microseconds to make the right decision.
Identify your inner food monster. I love it. Noted. Number four.
Number four would be, when you hear your inner food monster squealing, take a breath. Take a deep breath in, breathe out for longer than you breathed in for. That functions to help deactivate the emergency systems that are saying you need the chocolate to survive. You ever hear, just hand over the chocolate and nobody gets hurt? You're switching from your sympathetic nervous system, which is where the fight or flight, feast or famine response is, to your parasympathetic nervous system, which is about resting and digesting and taking it easy. And if you take that breath, you might remember who you are and why you wanted to make the rule in the first place.
I love that you say that. And I will say that that applies to everything, not just eating, folks. When it gets pretty crazy out there, take your breath. Are we number 5? I've lost count.
I think so.
Okay, hit it.
Number 5 would be to specifically disempower the false logic in your food monster's reasoning. So if your food monster says you can just start tomorrow, it's just as easy. Well, if you do a little research, you'll find out that it's actually not just as easy, because we're either always reinforcing or extinguishing our addictions. If I crave chocolate today and I eat chocolate today, my chocolate craving is going to be stronger tomorrow. If you're in a hole, stop digging.
I love that. If you're in a hole, stop digging. Yeah, because you're just going to crave chocolate tomorrow, folks. Things don't change that quickly. Number 6.
Get all of your food monster's reasons on the table in writing. If you carry around a piece of paper and a pencil or your smartphone with you, something to write with, and at these moments you actually write down why your food monster says you should break your rule, all the reasons, and then you write down all the reasons that they're wrong. Writing is an upper brain activity and binging is a lower brain activity. So it's another thing that moves the battleground from your impulses and emotions to your intellect. And it's there are only so many reasons you can keep in mind at once in your head, but because of the limitations of short-term memory, but if you put them down on paper, the whole picture becomes clearer to you, and you'll experience a calmness and a re-recognition of who you are and why you made the rule in the first place.
I love it. So kind of take your time. You're taking that breath and use it to your advantage. Write out some thoughts so you can kind of see clearly what's really going on here. Okay, number 7.
Number 7 is ask yourself why staying with your rule would make you a happier, better person. So I didn't make the rule, I'm never going to have chocolate again, so I could be miserable craving chocolate all my life, which I don't crave it at all anymore. I made it because I want to be a confident, thin man walking in the world as a leader. I made it because I want to be able to hike mountains and enjoy the top. I want to be able to have a romantic relationship with a woman. I want to be able to be a leader and influence millions of people. I could go on and on. There are dozens of reasons why not having chocolate makes me a happier, better person. When you link it to the future that you're building for yourself, then you're much more likely to go forward.
I love this. This is your inner vision board. This is the vision board for yourself. Keep your eye on the prize, which is a happy, healthy you and not a chocolate monster. Okay, number 8.
Number 8 is something that Peter McWilliams, a psychologist in the 1980s, said, an author in the 1980s said, you can have anything you want, but you can't have everything you want. You can have anything you want, you can't have everything you want. So when my food monster says, how can you give up chocolate? You're going to miss the taste. It's going to be too depriving. I will say, well, I make decisions as an adult in society to abstain from certain pleasures so I can pursue other pleasures in life. I can have anything I want, and what I want is all the things I just told you about to be happy. And I know that in order to do that, I can't have everything I want, which might include the chocolate. You can have anything you want. You can't have everything you want.
I love it. You're reinforcing just how you're going to outsmart this thing, which is so great. I want to add 2 little quick tips here that I've got, and you can tell me if this is psychologically sane or not. So my number 9, what I do is I figure that, after the break, so those of you who are listening on radio and can't listen to all of this, I really want you to go to the Awesome Vegans podcast after this, because we're going to talk about emotional eating. So sometimes I know the binge craze is going to come because the emotional whatever, the frazzled life is there and the pressure's there and you're going to have this urge. So what I do is I make a short list of myself of acceptable things that I can munch on if the munching need happens. So I make air popped popcorn, no olive oil, with nutritional yeast, maybe, sometimes just Bragg's. Sometimes it's air popped popcorn and Bragg's. And it gets that sort of craving of chomping and chewing, but I've really kept the calories at bay, and I haven't added all the salt and all the oil and all the things like this. So I have my little list that I'm ready for. And then my number 10 is when I really get the craving, I try to go walking, because I know that there are other things besides the desire for the food. There's anxiety maybe, or just a busy life and you just need a break. I try to walk it off.
I love it.
To keep the exercise in.
Elizabeth, it's very sane, both of those things.
Okay, good.
The first one is particularly sane because the binging urge is a biological error. Your body thinks that potato chips were food, or
Mm.
in my case, that chocolate was what it really needed. What I actually needed was energy, and I did a lot of experimenting when I would have the chocolate craving. I didn't just use these rules and these techniques. I would say, well, what can I have? I eventually came to a kale banana smoothie. I would juice a whole head of kale and have 6 bananas, and then I didn't want the chocolate anymore.
Awesome. So you're outsmarting yourself. That's just because you're a smart guy. Basically,
I suppose.
that's what we've come down to in this interview. I hate to go. If you want more information, stick around for the Awesome Vegans podcast. You can find it on iTunes, because Glenn and I are going to get into more of it, including emotional eating. Dr. Glenn, thank you for giving us your book, Never Binge Again. Go to neverbingeagain.com to get it for free. Everybody stick around, because the Awesome Vegans podcast is still going. I will see everybody on WCGO next week. Thanks for all you do, everybody. Thanks for being vegan. Together, we're taking back our health and the health of the planet. Bye, everybody. Stay put.
Yeah.
Oh, everybody, radio is over now. Glenn and I can just have a nice time and kick back. Thanks for everybody on Facebook for being flexible with us. So, Glenn, I do want to get into this, the emotional eating. So we've talked about, you think you have a food craving, or you're wanting some salt, or chocolate's your thing. But sometimes it's not the food at all. You've had an awful day. And this is, I guess we could say it's one's idea of a reward. And we could talk ourselves out of why we should reward ourselves with other things. But there's also that, chocolate makes you feel good, and you just need to feel good. How do you address the emotional issues?
Okay. I want to tell you a story. Do I have 3 minutes to tell a story?
No, we got all the time in the world.
Okay. I was interested in writing a book about this. Really trying to figure it out for myself long time ago. And because I was a consultant for big food, I netted all these big studies. And in the days when internet clicks were cheap, I funded my own study with 40,000 people. And I intercepted them when they were searching for solutions to stress or emotional difficulties. And I asked them what was stressful in their life and what foods could they not stop eating. And I found 3 very interesting relationships. And this story will not end where you think it's going to end. I just want to warn you about that up front. So the first thing that I found was that people who struggled with chocolate like I did tended to be lonely or brokenhearted. My binges always started with chocolate. People who struggled with chips and salty, crunchy things, they tended to be stressed at work. And people who struggled with chewy, starchy bagels, breads, pastas, even pizzas, they tended to be stressed at home. And so this was very curious to me. And I was in kind of a bad marriage, and I was lonely and brokenhearted at the time. But I was raised in a family of psychotherapists. There were 17 therapists across the larger family. And if anything broke in the house, we all knew how to ask it how it feels, and nobody could fix it. So I called my mom. And I said, Mom, I know it was 40 years ago, so I totally forgive you. But what happened? How did this pattern get set up that if I'm lonely or brokenhearted or upset about something, that I go running to chocolate? And she gets this horrible look on her face. And she goes, I'm so sorry, honey. And I said, Mom, it's okay. I forgive you. I just want to figure it out. She said, well, when you were 1 year old in 1965, your dad was a captain in the Army. And we thought they were going to send him to Vietnam, and I was terrified. We were trying to have your sister at the time, and I thought I'm going to be a young mom with 2 small kids. I'm going to be an Army widow. I was terrified. At the same time, my grandfather, your grandfather, just got out of prison. And I didn't know he was guilty. I didn't know he was doing these things. I idolized him my whole life. I was devastated. And so half the time when you came running to me for food or love or cuddles or play, I didn't have it to give it to you because I was staring at the wall feeling anxious and depressed. And so what I did was I kept a big bottle of chocolate Bosco syrup in a refrigerator on the floor. And I said, Glenn, go get your Bosco. And you'd go crawling over to the refrigerator and you'd take it out and you'd open the top and you'd suck on the bottle and you go into a chocolate sugar coma.
Oh my God. Oh my God. So, well, all right. That'll set you up for addiction right there. And we do forgive you, Mom. Yes.
And I do forgive my mom.
Yeah.
Well, see, if this was a movie, then at that point, Mom and I would have a big hug and a big cry, and I would never have trouble with chocolate again.
Right.
We did have a hug and a metaphorical cry. This is over Skype. And it was a good conversation to have because it helped me to forgive myself. It softened that negative voice a little bit. Certainly forgave my mom, learned a lot about her, asked her all kinds of other questions. It was a very good conversation to have. But my chocolate eating got worse. The reason my chocolate eating got worse was because there was this crazy voice in my head that said, you know what, Glenn? You're right. Our mama left a big chocolate-sized hole in our heart. And until we can find the love of our life and get out of this marriage, we're going to have to keep binging on chocolate. Yippee, let's go get some more right now.
Wow.
That changed the way that I thought about emotional things. I always thought my problem was there must be a hole in my heart. If I could fill the hole in my heart, I would stop trying to fill the hole in my stomach.
Yeah.
At that point, I said, well, wait a minute. Suppose emotion is like a fire. A roaring fire in a well-contained fireplace in the living room is an asset. It's not a liability. It's someplace where people gather around and they make memories and they laugh and they cry and they hug and they kiss. They tell stories. It's an asset. It's when there are holes in the fireplace that let ashes escape that there's a problem. And I realized that this voice of justification in my head was poking holes in that fireplace. And at that point, I kind of changed my thinking about the relationship between emotions and overeating. And I realized that there was this intervening fireplace and you could fix the fireplace without having to fix the emotions. So or it's kind of like if you come across your house and it's burning, you don't necessarily have to know what started it. You have to put out the fire. Like be a fireman, don't be a detective at that point. Can I say two more things about it and then I'll pause for questions?
Please. Yeah, we're going to take questions, folks. So bring it on. Okay, go ahead.
So the other thing about emotional eating to numb out or for comfort is that it's really interesting when you go to the dentist. They never said, I never had this experience. I don't know if you have. They've said, you know what, Glenn, I'm sorry, but I'm out of Novocaine. Is it okay if I inject you with some chocolate?
Right. Yes.
The reason they don't do that is because there's something more going on than just numbing out. It's true that when you overeat, that your nervous system has difficulty conducting the emotions because the energy is diverted to the digestive system.
Oh.
It's true it changes your neurochemistry when you have a bar of chocolate because of theobromine and caffeine and all the other things in it. But it's more like getting high with food. It's more like we're getting high with food. And I find that if people can switch their paradigm from thinking, I'm eating for comfort, I'm eating to numb my emotions, to I'm eating to get high with food, most people don't want to think of themselves as a drug addict. Most people, and if you say I'm eating for comfort, then your food monster is going to say, I'm so unhappy and I need more. So,
yes.
So
I see what you're saying. So rather than sort of coddle the monster, if you will, that's saying like, oh, poor you, it's more recognizing this is actually an addiction for me and I'm like food drunk. That's what I always say to myself, like, am I a food drunk? Like, I got to get that because I don't want to be a food drunk, FYI. I don't want to. So I kind of got to get this under wraps. I just want to shout out to the people who are sharing their emotions with us. Lisa Griffin and Tom Vincel, Beverly Miller, Diamond, Darcy Carrington, Beverly Miller Christian. All of you, thanks for being with us. And certainly Cleo 49, Tina Walker. There's probably people I'm not seeing here. Thank you everybody for being with us. And of course, ask your questions. I think this is so key, and really maybe you should come back because this is such a huge subject of the overeating, the emotional overeating. We're obviously trying to fill that hole. And really what I've found is if you're looking for an outside source to heal your pain, be it the food or, the love of your life, as you were saying, you're just going to be looking for the rest of your life. You got to find that from within. And until you start, what do I know, folks? FYI, I'm not a psychologist or psychiatrist.
You're doing great.
For myself, I feel like, as soon as you start addressing those holes and trying to take them on yourself and fix them so that you no longer have a hole, rather than continuing to fill the hole, which gets empty and empty and empty, and then you fill it and empty, fill empty, try to figure out what it is that's really making that hole and then try to plug it forever.
Well, and if you really want to get into the why of overeating, what the emotions are, then stop overeating. You won't get there.
Yes, I love this.
Yeah. Ask any therapist. You're going to make a lot more progress a lot quicker if you solve the practical problem first. If you're always distracting yourself with the food, you won't. There's another scientific fact about overeating and emotions that blows people's minds. And it's really very important. It turns out that people think that the junk food, let's say. They think that the junk food makes them feel better and that it's going to take away their anxiety, help them to sleep, something like that. Let's use that example. Let's say people say, I need to have a big bag of potato chips so I can go to sleep. Well, there are a whole bunch of animal studies in the world of operant conditioning where they monitor the correlates of emotion, perspiration, respiration, heartbeat, blood pressure. And when those physiological measures of emotion, the expression of emotion, when they are elevated past a certain level, then they give the animal a treat. Maybe it's a potato chip. Maybe it's sugar water. Well, do you know what happens to those animals?
They become addicts.
They become addicts, but they learn to keep, they do become addicts. They learn to keep their blood pressure elevated and their emotions in high gear. So you've actually reinforced the emotion you're trying to get away from. So people that say they have to eat something because they're too anxious and they won't be able to sleep, you're actually bringing your overall anxiety up, even though it's temporarily lower at the moment you're having the thing. Same thing with smoking. People think that smoking calms them down. It doesn't. Smoking will raise your blood pressure overall or raise your heart rate overall, except for when you have the cigarette. So you would have a lower heart rate and lower blood pressure if you didn't smoke than if you did. It's an illusion.
So much of this is an illusion, and the Band-Aid is so thin and doesn't last very long when you're just trying to fill whatever hole it is with food. But sometimes there's the emotional hole, and then there's also the physical hole. I find that even during COVID times, we are all so busy. Like, we were all supposed to relax during COVID time, or, stay inside, but it's like Zoom meeting after Zoom meeting after Zoom meeting. And sometimes people are just exhausted. So they're looking for energy and salt and sugar that they're just running themselves ragged. So there's like the emotional running ragged, and then there's the physical running ragged.
Well, and emotional needs are genuine needs also. And
yes,
we're all missing touch. Like, I mean, not everybody lives alone, but we're really missing touch. And there are physical costs of social disconnectedness. There's studies that indicate people get higher blood pressure, and there's an awful lot going on. And our fear responses on overload. Like the whole world seems like it's falling apart, and like, are we entering Armageddon? What's actually the apocalypse? Is that what's going on?
And every day we figure we have to ask ourselves that. Yeah, it's exhausting.
But you can use these simple rules. You can make one simple rule and make it a practice, just like yoga is a practice, where you center yourself and organize your psychology around being in control of your impulses and feeling proud of yourself and breathing and and then look to meet your emotional needs. Like I said, if I'm not someone who says, oh, poor baby, cry baby, just suck it up. I mean, I'm very much interested in helping people with their emotional needs. I just think it's a separate issue, separate and apart from binging. And I think the confusion between the two can lead people like me. I suffered for 30 years trying to find an emotional answer to this. And then I finally decided, well, how long is it going to take me to find the love of my life? That could be a lifetime. I better fix this food thing first. And maybe it's going to work backwards. Maybe if I'm more confident and settled about food, maybe I'm more attractive to, someone that could love me. So.
Yes. And I also think kind of taking that and flipping the script, something I like to tell myself is stop focusing on what you don't have and start focusing on what you do have. Because I do, I speak for myself, but I really shouldn't, we have a lot going on that is positive in our lives. And really that tends to overshadow what we don't have in our lives or what, so there's this positive reinforcement that I think is better for one to just say like, wait a minute, it's not Armageddon all day long, all the time. There are good things happening and there's positivity here too.
Exactly.
Oh, you guys, we're going to have Dr. Glenn Livingston back because there's so much to dive into here and so much to learn about. But we are starting today with the fact that you're giving everybody a free copy of Never Binge Again. So please, everybody, please go to neverbingeagain.com for that. And if you want to get a meal plan under your belt for yourself, go to elisabethalfano.com/recipes. And also, if you want to learn some life tips and hacks, come join me on August 8th for my Jumpstart Your Plant-Based Life class. Before I let you go in full, I want to, because you're such a positivity guy, I want to know when you're having a bad day and if things haven't gone exactly as you thought they would, what's your favorite quote? What do you say to yourself to get yourself back in the game?
I say, always use the present moment to be healthy, and a life of discipline is better than a life of regret. The first one is my quote. The last one is Jim Rohn's quote.
I love that. I love that. Okay, everybody, we now are now armed to be better and healthier and happier for ourselves. Of course, we're all going to go get neverbingeagain.com to get Never Binge Again, which is so great. Dr. Glenn Livingston, thank you for being with me. I really appreciate it. And I do hope
really
that you'll
enjoyed
come
this.
back.
This was a special interview. Thank you.
So fun. Glenn, don't go away. Everybody else, I will see you tomorrow at 1 o'clock for the Plant-Based Business Hour. Thanks for being with me, everybody.